Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking back specifically to the mid-1990s. This was DSM-IV time.
Right, 1994.
And it was a really pivotal moment. We saw this explosion in ASD diagnoses went up over 22 times.
Huge numbers. But, and this is the core of our deep dive today, there was this hidden story, right?
Yeah.
A massive population, mostly individuals assigned female at birth, just weren't being seen.
Exactly. It's a paradox. Awareness goes way up, but visibility for some actually drops.
And that failure, well, it was kind of systemic. It ties back directly to how the DSM-IV defined pervasive developmental disorders, or PDDs.
That rigid three-part structure.
Yeah. You needed clear deficits in, 1, social interaction, 2, communication, and 3, those restricted repetitive behaviors, the RRBs. All 3 had to be obvious.
Okay, let's quantify this first. The missing girls. The numbers from that era are pretty stark.
Oh, they're more than stark. Clinically, the diagnosis ratio is about 6 males to every 1 female.
6 to 1. Wow.
6 to 1. And, if you compare that to what we think the actual underlying prevalence is now, well, it's closer to 3 males for every 1 female.
So that difference, that gap between 6.1 and 3.1, that's the statistical picture of the missing girls.
Precisely. They were there, but the system just wasn't identifying them.
And this wasn't just happening at the final diagnosis stage, right?
Yeah.
The failure started much earlier.
Way earlier. In the referral pipeline, we see data showing that even if screening flagged similar numbers of boys and girls, boys were significantly more likely to actually finish the assessment process.
What were the numbers, something like that?
It was around 29% for boys completing assessment versus only 22% for girls. So girls were dropping out of the pathway much sooner.
Filter out before they even got a proper look?
An early exit ramp, exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack why. What were the barriers in the DSM-IV system itself? We've identified 3 main ones. Barrier number 1 seems pretty fundamental. Structural bias.
Yeah, this is foundational. The DSM-IV criteria, they were overwhelmingly built on research looking at male subjects.
So the entire framework was kind of skewed from the get-go.
Absolutely. It just wasn't adequately designed to recognize what we now sometimes call the female autism phenotype, or FAP. The blueprint was wrong for them.
Which leads right into the second barrier,
Good.
how the traits actually looked different, phenotypic divergence.
Huh. Let's take restricted interests, those RRBs. In the sort of classic male presentation back then, maybe it was trains or intricate mechanics, very specific, maybe obviously unusual.
Okay.
But in many females, the intensity of the interest was just as strong, just as absorbing, but the topic might be different. Things like horses, or maybe certain book series, pop stars, even social causes.
Stuff that looks more culturally typical.
Exactly. So a clinician might see the intense focus on, say, a particular band and just think, oh, typical teenage girl phase. They'd miss the sheer depth and rigidity of the interest because the subject matter itself didn't raise a red flag. The diagnostic intensity got overlooked.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the third barrier, this one feels really crucial, camouflaging or masking.
Yes, this is the active effort, and it is effortful, cognitively draining, to basically mimic neurotypical social behavior, using scripts, forcing eye contact, suppressing stims.
And this is more common in females.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Often linked to higher social motivation, wanting to fit in. But here's the tragic catch. The DSM-IV required those observable external signs of autism. So the better someone was at masking, at hiding their autistic traits to try and cope socially.
The less likely they were to meet the diagnostic criteria.
Precisely. Their success at camouflaging made them clinically invisible.
But, okay, if they're working so hard to seem socially engaged, wouldn't a clinician just check the social box as fine? How do they reconcile that?
Well, that's where misdiagnosis often came in. They saw the effort, maybe, but often missed the underlying deficit because the masking covered it up. So instead of seeing ASD, they diagnosed the fallout.
The consequences of the masking.
Exactly. The sheer exhaustion and internal stress of constantly performing. So you saw a lot of misdiagnoses like anxiety or depression. That internal struggle was visible.
Right, the internal cost.
And sometimes, especially with girls who had higher IQs, you might see ADHD diagnosed. Maybe the restlessness or intense focus came through, but because the social piece looked okay due to masking, they didn't connect it to autism.
So diagnosing the effect, not the cause.
That's a good way to put it. They treated the psychological distress without seeing the root neurological difference.
It really highlights how that rigid 3-domain structure of the DSM-IV just fundamentally failed a whole segment of the population.
It did. Things are better now, certainly. The DSM-5 combined the social and communication domains, which helps capture things more fluidly. But that historical 6.1 ratio, it's a stark reminder of that past failure.
And looking back isn't just academic, right? There are real, lasting consequences.
Huge consequences. Think about it. Being denied a diagnosis, denied understanding and support during those critical developmental years in the 90s. That placed these individuals at a much higher risk for negative outcomes later in life.
Like what, specifically?
Well, research suggests increased risks for things like chronic mental health issues, difficulties with employment and relationships, and even significantly higher rates of experiencing sexual violence and intimate partner violence, often linked to missing social cues or difficulties asserting boundaries that weren't understood or supported. Also, higher rates of PTSD.
Wow. So the cost of relying on that narrow, male-focused model wasn't just misdiagnoses. It was and is a profound societal cost in terms of safety and well-being.
Absolutely. It really underscores why getting the diagnostic criteria right and applying them broadly is so incredibly important to have lifelong impact.